Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Nerds and Jesus podcast. Welcome. My name is Mary Howell. I'm a Christian and a worship leader who happens to also be a huge nerd according to myself, all my friends, family, and coworkers. And on this pod, we have been discussing how Christian nerds are to navigate living in the secular world, how we are to be a light in the darkness while also nerding out on all types of fandoms pop culture has to offer. And today I will be breaking down and recapping the first 3 episodes of Secret Invasion. Yeah, you heard it right. It's just beyond this episode, but do not fear. It's still going to be lots of fun recapping all the information, discussing theories that I have and also many in our nerdy community have as well. So we're going to jump in. We're going to start at the top of episode 1. So if you haven't seen any of these episodes, I would suggest pausing this episode and coming back to it because we're going to dive into all of the spoilers. So let's start at the beginning. Episode 1. We start in Moscow. So my first reaction to after seeing this first episode, I wanted more. I think that's kind of been, I guess I'll share a little bit my reaction to the first 3 episodes. I don't know if I enjoy them as much as I think I wanted to enjoy these episodes, but man, as you know, with Marvel, you know, it's kind of one of those things where there's going to be some information thrown in there that eventually we know it's going to be useful in the future. But if you really like more of spy, espionage kind of things, this is the show for you. So we're going to go from the top, you know, episode 1. And so we started in Moscow, and this actually takes place after She-Hulk. So this is late 2025, early 2026. We're not so sure on the dates because I just feel like it keeps changing. But at the top of the episode, we see Agent Ross. You know, Agent Ross, we've seen him in many episodes, or I mean, many, you know, not episodes, many movies and films before this in Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he's returning at the beginning of episode 1. And he's in a conversation with Prescott where it's in this room where he's telling him, Prescott is telling Agent Ross that there's no one to trust. And he has this whole wall of newspaper articles and just conspiracy, just collages all around that room. And he's talking about just the political shift in the world and all the different events that have been taking place. And, you know, Agent Ross is like, okay, yeah, so what's the point here? As we realize later, you know, Agent Ross ain't Agent Ross. But, you know, at this point, you know, Prescott is suggesting that it's actually Skrulls creating this chaos and it's only the beginning. And we see all of that as he begins to talk about, you know, the moment that they first arrived with Fury and all this stuff. And Agent Ross is just trying to, you know, like, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But Prescott eventually notices that it's not Agent Ross, it's actually Skrull, fake Ross. But fake Ross ends up killing Prescott, which is unfortunate, and quickly calls Agent Maria Hill. So fake Ross ends up dying on the street as we find out that his pursuer is actually Talos. So we haven't seen him in a hot minute. We've seen him pop up already, you know, in the MCU, you know, in Spider-Man and also, and of course, in Captain Marvel. So we've seen Talos like pop up many times. And so then it kind of like shifts gears to where we see Fury coming off of the Saber ship. So he's coming up from space and Maria Hill, you know, picks him up and they're in the rooftop. And so that's when we see Talos meet with Fury. You know, they give each other the Skrull greeting of having their foreheads next, you know, close up to each other. So we see that. And we see, you know, they speak about just a lot of different things, but Talos even, you know, mentions it to Fury, you know, how much he's changed, how much Fury has changed, you know, and, you know, and all that, and gets him up to date on all the thing that the council has been up to and, you know, stuff like that. So we eventually see Fury get upset, you know, takes a stroll at night, where Sonia Fallsworth from MI6 picks him up, which the actress, can't remember her name right now, but man, I just remember her so much from Doctor Who. So I was really excited to see her in the MCU. So that was really cool to see. So yeah, Fallsworth, she tells him that, you know, tells Fury, you know, you're old and her men was able to grab you, and which Fury, of course, then tells you know that that's what he wanted her to do, and so that he can meet her face to face. And we actually later see, you know, basically Fury hiding a bug on one of her owls, which of course is very Fury of him. But yeah, we see we also get a look of the Skrull base, which is so interesting. You know, we're like a newcomer is walking up to the base and we see Gaia pick him up and gives him a fruit from the homeland. And so it's so interesting to see, you know, a lot of these Skrulls that are in this compound are, you know, they're wanting to be in a place where they can be themselves, or they're able just to not have, you know, not to shapeshift. They can be, you know, what they actually look like. But later we also see kind of it's a little troublesome as well with Gavik and all that. So we'll see that later on. So then we see the bodies, that the scrolls have been taking, so that they can have access to their memories, and where they wouldn't, so that there isn't any issues taking their forms. And so seeing that at first, you realize like, dang, like they're keeping it in, but even like we're seeing them, take the memories of the scroll bodies, kind of how we saw that even in Captain Marvel, a really similar technology. And so the first body that, that we see on the right is the same art dealer that we see later in the episode between Talos and Fury. Yeah, then the scrolls, bring in this kidnapped American and takes his face, takes his mind. And we see that kind of take place. And so obviously he becomes later on, as we see in this episode, that same scroll using that face of an American saying, hey, I'm an American, making sure that everyone knows that he's an American that just bombed Moscow. So that's kind of why, he's saying that a lot. But yeah, we're at that point where we are then back at Scroll Base with Gaia in the lunchroom, and Gravik's there at another booth, and Gravik's second in command is a scroll named Pangon. In the comics, Pangon was a scroll that had impersonated Elektra. So yeah, he sends Gaia with a driver named Xerxu, might be pronouncing this wrong, but which Xerxu was a scroll that impersonated Richard Nixon in the comics. Fun fact. And so, we asked the questions, how many other presidents were scrolls? That's, they only kind of went up to Reagan when they went in the White House, and you kind of see a lot of the different images and pictures of the president. So a lot of the question is, how many more of these presidents were scrolls? We're not sure if the current president may not be a scroll, as even you see in the credits at the beginning that a lot of the buildings take in this green color, kind of showing that they're infiltrated, but the White House remains white. So we are, it's probably maybe a suggestion that the current president right now is not a scroll. So who knows? But as we keep going, we find out that Talos is actually 136 years old, which is kind of crazy, and which is about, I guess, 40 human years. So I guess that would make scrolls about 280 years old, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, and Talos then asks Fury, this is my favorite part. He then asks Fury like what he got for his midlife shopping, shopping spree essentially. And Fury's like, he got the Avengers, his midlife crisis, and he got the Avengers. So that's so funny. I definitely giggled at that. But yeah, Talos and Fury then, they meet up with that art dealer, finding that information. And after fighting, Fury does end up killing that scroll, and Talos is really upset by it because it's hard killing one of his own. And at the same time, we then later see Gaia coming up and pretty much beating Maria very, very well. I mean, skilled fighter, and which is later then to be revealed that that's actually Talos's daughter. So plot twist, and then that's when Talos reveals Soren's death to her, and she did not know. And she asked like who killed who killed her, and Talos basically tells her ask the people you work for. So Graphic is responsible in some way in Soren's death, and yeah, so that was a kind of bummer to find out. But yeah, later we see Fury and Mary Howell at this bar, and we see Fury speak Russian to a man, and it was interesting hearing him speak, I think, another language. We're always used to hearing him obviously speak in English, so it was really cool to see kind of a obviously he would know that Russian, or he would know other languages. I mean, as a spy, you would kind of suggest you would really I just never really thought about it. I never thought he would, but yeah, it was really cool hearing him speak Russian. But the guy that he was talking to was the same man that Gravik had shapeshift earlier, and we see many other people that Gravik had shapeshift at the end of this episode. So question almost makes you think like how close Gravik really was probably this whole time, or just keeping an eye on Fury, already knowing where he is, and Fury not even realizing it. So that's a little bit interesting thing to realize. But yeah, we see in their conversation just with between Maria Hill and Fury, just how difficult it's been for Fury after the blip. And we see that a little bit more of just how hard it's been for him and just what he's been up to. And also the next two episodes. But yeah, we see Gaia, tips off Talos, hey, there's 3 couriers of the bomb. And but obviously later we know that it's a setup. And Fury then which is interesting. So earlier in that episode when he was taken by Fallsworth, he sees a little girl at the ball, and then he sees that couple kissing. And usually, if you remember in Captain America Winter Soldier, Natasha tells Steve, like, go to kiss me, because people just find it really awkward, but it's the complete opposite in that moment, when Fury's walking, at night in Moscow and that couple's kissing, like they make straight eye contact without even, flinching. And so, but, at where the bomb was set up, we see the same little girl with the colorful ball. And then he follows it and then shapeshifts into the man that we see at the bar. And then the man shapeshifts into the woman from that kissing couple earlier in the episode, and then shapeshifts into finally Gravik. And so even seeing Gravik, shapeshift in front of, not even caring who's seeing him, just shows him gratitude. What's the word? Whatever. You just show, just how, he just doesn't really care what other people are going to say. It's kind of one of those things. And unfortunately, y'all, the end of the episode, detonates the bomb. A lot of people killed. And then Gravik disguises and shapeshifts as Fury and kills Maria Hill. And R.I.P. Maria Hill. I honestly didn't expect it. I was really excited to see more of her in this episode. When the episode, the whole series, man, she's been there since the beginning. And so it was so hard not to see her gone. So that was, I'm sure, as everyone else, as shocked and everything, and part of you kind of almost, hoped that maybe it's not really Maria Hill, maybe it's Soren, because Soren in the past, Talos' wife, had shapeshift, as disguised herself as Maria Hill in Spider-Man. So, you question like, oh, maybe, but no, she didn't change the scroll. And I guess maybe even mentioning their, Soren's death at the very beginning really eliminates that even possibility of Maria Hill ever being a scroll. So, man, yeah, that's kind of crazy. So that was a really emotional way to end it. So it's the end of an era for Maria Hill. I really love seeing her in the MCU. So, so that's the end of an era for her. So, yeah, that's episode 2. So, we're going to jump into episode 1. We're going to jump into episode 2 now. So, all right, if you've been following along, we're starting episode 2. So if you watched episode 1 already and you haven't seen episode 2, this is your moment now to pause the episode and to go. This one's gonna be a little longer. Episode 1 didn't feel as long, I guess, when I was writing the summary and everything, but episode 2 was a lot longer. So, all right, put on your seatbelt. Let's go. All right, episode 2. This episode starts off in Brixton. So it's a neighborhood in London in 1997. And so if you remember, in that last episode, maybe not, probably didn't even catch it, but I saw some Easter eggs on it when I was even just researching more and stuff like that from other folks. And yeah, I had never noticed that there was even a poster in the safe house where Talos and Fury and Maria Hill first meet up, actually mentioning the Brixton neighborhood. So that neighborhood actually has a lot of history, like in Brixton, of immigration and stuff like that. So it would make sense that this is where they're meeting with all the Skrulls. So this is 1997, 2 years after the events of Captain Marvel. And so this was the early stages of Fury's just launch of the Avenger Initiative, before it was shut down by the World Security Council leading up to, 2012 Avenger events. But when Fury essentially, deputizes the Skrull refugees, they might have been a part of the first plan of the Avenger Initiative. We never know. They might have been the usually the folks that Fury had relied on even before the Avengers really took place. So yeah, this may have been just the first try, as you will, so we see then Vera is introducing young Gravik. And so the thing about Vera is that in the New Avengers comics of 2015, Vera is a Skrull Kree hybrid. She's like one of the Knights of the Infinites who is saved by Young Avengers, Hulkling, and Wiccan. And so Hulkling is also half Skrull, and Vera also seems to be the same Skrull that Fury's married to, which is Priscilla Fury, as we see at the end of the episode. So we find out from Vera that Gravik's parents died in their last stand against the Kree. And if you remember Captain Marvel, we learned that the Kree destroyed the homeworld of the Skrulls, which is why they had been scattered and escaped. And so this is kind of them coming into as refugees. And so Fury, looks at all these Skrulls, in this room. I think it was really cool to see them, even offer them, I will find you all a new home, and you have to take, new faces to blend in. And this is something that some other creators had really pinpointed. And man, I didn't even catch it the first time I watched it. Was it's interesting because, you know, even when the Asgardians took refuge on Earth, they were granted a piece of land. They were not, you know, asked to blend in or take their human, you know, take in the human culture. There was no expectations for them to even assimilate or like to change who they are at all. So the Asgardians, you know, come as you are. Here's a place for you. This is your place. But, you know, but the expectations for the Skrulls totally different, like really, you know, even represents how some like ethnic and immigrant groups are just expected to hide or erase their heritage while others get to celebrate there. So it was interesting to kind of see that correlation between two different sides, you know, of it. But yeah, so I think that was really cool what the way they represented that. But yeah, we then see that, you know, Agent Hill like really is dead because we see her casket with her mom there. And that was also all the emotions again. And, you know, her mom's just angry, you know, doesn't, you know, she goes up to Fury. She's like, she doesn't even, no one's told her where she died. I can't even imagine that, you know, of just even not knowing, you know, not having just that piece about that. And then, you know, Fury ends up telling her the truth and she's like, all right, so I can blame you. I'm like, oh man, that's just a tough spot, you know, to be in, I'm sure, you know. But yeah, that was really sad to see. But what's interesting is that we see, and then I'll mention this later, and a lot of people have mentioned this, like we see like Fury almost have two different looks. He has the look where he's like wearing a suit and the glasses and the hat. And we have the other look where, you know, it's like a beanie and a hoodie or, you know, sweater or whatever. So, and no glasses at all. So I don't know. It's there's something going on there. There's a lot of theories around that, and we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But I don't know. So yeah, we then see, you know, Talos and Fury in the train, where Fury tells, you know, Talos of, you know, just his past, you know, with segregation and just his hardships as his family, you know, growing up like that. And man, it just, you know, gave you so much, like, it was really cool to even hear a lot of his story and his background. We hardly ever really got much of that. And that's what's been really cool, I think, about these episodes is like we get to hear and see more of Fury's past, which we knew nothing about. So, but yeah, and he tells Talos about the game that he had played with his mom, you know, called Tell Me Something I Don't Know. And again, you know, he's wearing the glasses in the scene. So it shifts literally from scene to scene where he's wearing no glasses, the beanie and everything, and all of a sudden he's wearing the glasses and everything. And so we're thinking, you know, what if the glasses, you know, they have the infrared technology to just, you know, to decide which ones of the bombs are, you know, what if it has like a heart rate monitor or analyzing tech, you know, kind of, I mean, basically like, you know, Tony's glasses that he gave Peter, you know, so something similar to that. And so that's kind of what everyone's kind of thinking about. So FYI. But yeah, so, you know, he tells Talos about this game, you know, and which Talos reveals to him that all 1 million of the Skrulls that escaped from the Kree have settled on Earth. And most of them after the blip in the past few years while Fury was on Saber. And so you can imagine, you know, Fury is kind of like, what in the world? Are you kidding me? Why? You know, you can't do this, you know, and I mean, it's just one of those things, you know, where Fury's like, man, like humans and Skrulls cannot coexist. I mean, humans can barely coexist with each other. You know, we see that. And Taylor, you know, tells Fury that, you know, that very Skrull that isn't, or some of the Skrulls, you know, he mentioned about Emperor's Drogu's colony, that anyone who wasn't in Emperor's Drogu's colony, there's the one who answered. I looked it up. So in the comics, Drogu is a scientist that studied and captured members of the Illuminati and discovers super Skrulls, which is what we're seeing unfold as the main plot of the series. Super Skrulls can, you know, mimic the powers and appearance of those they impersonate, which is kind of a big deal. So Talos, you know, later on, you know, from that, Talos tells, you know, wants humans and Skrulls to coexist. And, you know, Fury is just furious and furious. Get it? But yeah, he tells him, you know, that, you know, they just can't coexist. And honestly, that they part ways from that moment. You know what? Get out. He's like, go away, you know. So we're like, all right, you know, I wonder how they're going to resolve that. But anyway, we later see Gravik and Gaia, to where, you know, Gravik reveals how, you know, they're in the car and Gravik's just telling him, yeah, you know, Fury's just, he just changed. He's old after the blip. He's like a vapor. Like, it doesn't matter. He just wanted to kind of test him, kind of see. But then we see, where they're headed to, and Gravik is meeting with the Scroll Council, which comprises of the UK Prime Minister, the NATO Security General, and then someone else from like media and stuff like that. It's kind of like just one of the media outlets, mainly media outlets, and then two others, which not revealed. I mean, it might be like someone who is like a, company, tech, or whatever it is. So, and, in the secret, which is another part, of who's Skrulls, because in the Secret Invasion comics, we see that even like Barack Obama, John McCain, and even Stephen Colbert are Skrulls. So anyone literally can be Skrulls. There's 1 million all over the world, and they have taken up the high ranks. So you don't know. Gravik here, he's beginning to make his case, for the downfall of the humans and bringing war and all the things, and reason why he should be a leader, kind of thing. And the council, is worried about what would happen, if the Avengers return. And Gravik's like, don't you think I've already thought about that? And which obviously he's referring to the program of making Super Skrulls. Then, the UK Skrull Prime Minister nominates Gravik as general. And so everyone's like, oh, you were in on it. And so I was like, oh no, they're making him, general. It's not a great thing, of course. And so I, when one of the security members, they had a change, into their face to say that they're following Gravik. And when one of them ended up not wanting to support and left, I was honestly quite shocked that Gravik didn't kill her right then and there, that he let her go. So I was kind of shocked about that. I was waiting for that moment where she would leave and she wouldn't be unalived. So I don't know, maybe, So that was also surprising on Gravik's part. So, when they return to the Skrull base, we see how Gravik is just kind of beginning to keep Gaia out of the loop. I think he's now starting to suspect that she, is kind of giving intel to her dad. And so, we see him even go into this random woman saying, oh, all that you've done, like, we couldn't have done it without you. I'm like, who is she? Like, I don't remember seeing her at all. So I don't know. He might have done that on purpose. And she begins to follow his second in command later on, Pangon, to a room. So yeah, when she follows him into this room where she finds that there's like these energy fields, which is where they make Super Skrulls. So this is the process, is being overseen by a couple named the Daltons. So Gaia's kind of, watching from the back, and I mean, this is pretty big deal. This is something different that she realized that Gravik has been keeping essentially a secret from her. So anyway, scene switches, and we see Rhodey in a room with the heads of the states to discuss the matter, or the possibility of the U.S. involvement in the bombings of Moscow, and a Fury being there because the potential of World War III, and Gravik and his team essentially purposefully making sure that they think it's the Americans. It's the fact that it's kind of crazy. So, Rhodey's kind of being very adamant. He's like, you have no evidence, all like that, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, he knows that Fury's there, and they know that Fury's there. And so it's a whole thing. But then we see, Fury ended up calling Rhodey on the phone, and they met together at a tavern, and Rhodey threatens to give Fury, to the Russians. And we're not really even sure, like, how Rhodey even has the authority to even, like, obviously we see him try to, basically fire, Fury, but, we don't even know Rhodey's title at all. But, Fury warns Rhodey and, like, of a global network of spies. And then Rhodey actually reveals that he's known about the Skrulls for 15 years ago. And so, and the question is like, well, so if Rhodey knew about the Skrulls, Tony would, right? He would know about it at this point. So I don't know. But as we don't know about Rhodey as well, question mark, So Rhodey mentions that Skrulls had a few light ships that crashed down to Earth, which, if y'all remember, in after like Avengers Age of Ultron, taking us way back, at this point, the Hulk has like flown out. He's going into space, but they're trying to find his ship. And Fury mentioned to Romanoff, that, hey, or Natasha, that they're tracking a ship that had landed in the ocean that wasn't the Hulk, but well, I'm telling you, like, it wasn't the Hulk, but Tony's tech couldn't even pin it down. So, question mark, is that what they were talking about this whole time, of the few light ships that crashed down to Earth from the Skrulls? So I don't know. Fury says that that they shouldn't get the Avengers in on it because of the threat of them just being duplicated by the Skrulls. So I can see that as a problem. If they get their full on DNA, that would not be good. And after arguing a bit, as I said, Rhodey ends up firing Fury, and both are. It's like both are coming from rational places, and I see it. Just how, Rhodey's coming from more of hey, we have to think this through, like politically, all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I get this as well. And Fury's like, nah, it's like, I'm Nick Fury. Even when I'm out, I'm in, so that's the kind of Nick Fury that we're wanting more of. It's been really hard to see this kind of side of him. That's just kind of question, not having that whole being ahead of himself, like you could see that he was even surprised, with the whole bombing in the last episode. And so he's kind of taken back of like, not really he's not like a few steps ahead. So it's been really hard to see him this way. So I'm not gonna lie, but also interesting to see I know by the end of the series, I'm hoping, obviously we see him in Marvels. So we know that he's back on Saber. We're doing something, so we're seeing that, in the trailer. But yeah, so, this is the message that Fury, needs to keep sharing with everyone as he's returned from Saber. So, yeah, so gear shifts. Fallsworth, as I remember, she goes to this Russian butcher shop and interrogates the Skrull there. Can't remember his name right now. I think it's Rogan. Correct me if I'm wrong. But at the same time, we see also, it kind of goes back and forth scenes, Gaia sneaking around the Skrull's base. And she's trying to figure out, what are they doing in that room? Why do they have all these machines? Like, what's going on? So she goes to the computer and she sees the samples of Marvel creatures that the Skrulls have been harvesting DNA from. Like, listen. So on the screen, if you didn't catch it, I saw the first one when I first watched it and I had to go back and pause it. So on the screen, the first one that we see is Groot, which is the sample that they had acquired from Earth. We don't know where. I mean, it could have been Wakanda, it could have been anywhere else. But yeah, so it's actually Groot's sample on it of his DNA. Then we see the Frost Beast from Jotunheim. So this probably was acquired during the convergence in Thor Dark World as they brought in the Frost Beast from that point on onto Earth. And so that's probably where they got the DNA from. The third thing on the list is the Coal Obsidian. And so which is listed, which is Thanos' like minion, like Infinity War, where if you remember when Wong was doing the portal and then he chopped off his arm. So that's who that is, the Coal Obsidian. And so the photo on the screen that guy is looking at is of the severed hand. And so we're pretty much sure that that's the exact one. Well, the last thing actually scrolls a little bit down, then we see Extremis. So if you remember this in Iron Man 3, those were the fire combustible test subjects that they had in there pretty much that they were able to reform with fire. So, and so you see them even like pop up again, like in the fighting club and like Shang-Chi as well. So you see the Extremists kind of there. So you see they have that DNA. So not a great thing. So you definitely said they're on this path. And there's other theories that some other folks have said that a lot of these 4 different DNAs, it's kind of what makes up like the Fantastic Four. And the Fantastic Four, the Super Skrulls that was one of the first people that they ended up taking their powers and everything. So it's interesting in the comics. So they might be putting that together. I don't know if it's actually going to be a thing or not, but I don't know. You never know. But yeah, so then we see Fallsworth inject the Skrull, Rogan, like with a serum that boils his blood. So not fun. And he can then Rogan, the Skrull, ends up confessing that the Daltons are leading the science for the Super Skrulls program. And Fallsworth at this point, she doesn't really seem surprised or shocked. It's as if she already knew, but she just wanted like confirmation that her suspicions were correct. And then we see Graphic and his team kind of come in, shoot up the place, grab Rogan. Fallsworth already making her escape underground. And all this while we see Gaia then speaking in Russian, most likely of the Skrulls' safe house to the police. And so that's kind of how that word got out. So we later see Fury at the very end, the last thing in this episode, we see Fury and his wife Priscilla, where, that she comes in and she's in Skrull form at first. And Fury's coming in and she's like, did you forget something? And then she changes into her human form and he gets the ring. And so this is like the wife basically. So the only other mention we ever have of Fury's wife was in Captain America Winter Soldier, whenever Fury shows up in Steve's apartment and he mentions about having a wife. And so, yeah, but we didn't know he was telling the truth or not. So we had no idea. So, yeah, it is all confirmed in these episodes. So, definitely interesting thing. So anyway, that's the second episode. It was definitely interesting. I liked it a lot better than the first episode. Again, I feel like it was a little bit slow, but I think it's just growing into more of it. We're learning where everyone is, what everyone's play are, but yeah, so we're going to jump gears to episode 3 now. So if you have not seen episode 3, then this is your moment to pause the episode and then come back. Episode 3. Here we go. This episode, we see the 3 Skrulls disguising themselves as part of the Navy. And so even one of them is the new recruit, if you remember from episode 1. I don't remember his name right now at the moment, but it's okay. But you know who I'm talking about. So we then see, Gravik leading the Skrull Council into the chamber where the energy fields are. And so he's explaining, and this is where he actually uses the term Super Skrulls. So he's explaining it. And as I mentioned in during the episode 2, the Super Skrulls, was first introduced in the 1963's Fantastic Four with the Skrulls' ability to impersonate the Fantastic Four's abilities. And so that's why it was interesting that a lot of the exact DNA that they got kind of matches it, where you think of Groot, you think it's, being I guess stretchy in a way, like moving around, and I don't know. So the fire with the extremists, so I don't know, we don't know. But yeah, so we see that happening. So then we see the 3 Skrulls going into the HMNB Clyde HM naval base. And so this naval base is actually a real naval base. It's in Scotland. And I think it never even had ties to more nuclear stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Gravik's plan here is to hijack the submarine to shoot down a plane to start a global conflict. Essentially, more tension, more possible start of a World War III kind of thing. So, and the submarine is called Neptune. So, which is, as we know from Neptune in Greek mythology, and there too within water. So that makes sense. But, we do find out that, question mark, is this a fake plot from Gravik to see if Gaia's a spy? That's kind of one of those things where we don't know. We'll later find out. So then we have a flashback here. Flashback to New York City, 1998. To where, Fury is walking into this restaurant and he meets Vera as to where, she's taken on a new form, as Priscilla, and he's asking her where's his new form? You could tell that he likes the new form, and he's taken aback and all that kind of thing. And so Vera then ends up handing him some information to take down Drakov. I can't say his name, Drakov. So if you remember from Black Widow, like the movie Black Widow, solo movie that we got way too late, but it happened. In Black Widow, General Drakov was the leader of the Russian Red Room. So Drakov's daughter was actually first mentioned in the Avengers from Loki to Black Widow, which was later, it was revealed that, Antonia Drakov, aka, was Taskmaster. So this intel that Vera's giving Fury may have been linked to Natasha's Budapest mission in Black Widow. So that's kind of where that information is being passed over. So that's kind of that's happening right there. So this is 1998. 1 year after he actually had all the refugees in one room and talked to them. So if you know timeline stuff. So we jump back to the present and we see Priscilla and Fury in the kitchen, and we see that Priscilla ends up telling Fury of just the hardship that she's had to endure. Man, I can't imagine basically wholeheartedly believe, not knowing if your husband's returning. I mean, she was a widow, involuntarily, and then she mentions but then when you decided to leave and not come back and not knowing when you're coming back, going Saber to go to space, that was a voluntary thing, and it was as if she was losing him all over again. I'm that's so hard. That's hard on her. But if you notice, y'all, Fury's wearing his glasses again, so he's asking her he's a little sus, suspicious. She's a little sus to him, suspicious. I'm just throwing in a Gen Z word. You're welcome. But yeah, she then takes this call, and Fury's would you take this call? She's she takes it. And so Fury's turning around. And so we saw some other folks even wondering, if he's turning around, maybe there's a microphone in the back of his glasses. Is he listening in to what they're saying? We don't know. We don't know who it is on the other end. But, so we're not sure on, what was on the other end of that phone call. We don't know. So then the scene switches to Gravik. And so it turns to Gravik and he is grilling Gaia, asking her about how do the cops know the location of the safe house? And, Gaia is, of course, denying it. Maybe Rogan, maybe he said something and, Gravik's just not buying it. You could just tell. And even though, she's she was the one that made the phone call to the cops. So, I don't know. So then she and Gravik, Talos ended up contacting about, they just wanted to make a truce, just wanted to talk. And so they ended up agreeing. And they meet at this art gallery. And so Gravik and Talos meet there. And they're in the cafe. And as we later find out, everyone else in the room is a scroll. And what's interesting is that they all, shape shift into looking like Gravik. And so definitely intimidating, I'm sure, for Talos. So, and as they kept talking, Talos, tries to convince him out of it, but it's just hard not to convince Gravik out of it. Tries to, to stop him from what he's doing. But Gravik just, he thinks that humans are evil. Like he always, is relating to that. And then after arguing, Talos ends up stabbing, Gravik's arm and he leaves. But then we see Gravik pull it out and heals it using the extremist tech that we are already showing that he's become a super scroll. And as we saw the extremist DNA on the screens from episode 2. So it's already been working on him. They've already been working on it. We can see it's happening kind of thing. Not a great thing. So as Taylor's walking out, Gaia shapeshifts as someone else and hands him a burner phone. And she's able to make a quick escape because as Gravik's coming out, she disguised as this old man, but it was a nearby civilian. So as she left, Gravik comes out and she sees her by the car, but the same person that she had disguised as was like right next to her on the phone call. So very smart of her to do that, but Gravik, catch it? We don't know. So yeah, so she wrote to the phone, the Neptune submarine information on it so that Talos knew. So then we see Fury ends up meeting Talos at a pub. Now, here's the thing, guys. Is this the Nick Fury we know, or is this a scroll? Are there two Nick Furies? Because, people are speculating that there's another Nick Fury because he calls Talos' food here dog food. When we just saw him in an earlier scene in the kitchen cooking the exact same food, same dish at home. So is there two Nick Fury, the one who's hanging around running with Talos and all that, with the beanie and everything with no glasses, and then there's another one. Is it Talos' wife? Question mark. There's so many questions. We don't know. So we're keeping an eye on that. Speaking of an eye, they ended up calling Fallsworth to where she found Fury spyware and obviously did not trust Fury, where, she named the little owl Nicholas. Fury gave it an eye patch, but she gave it an eye patch because she probably doesn't know what else they could see. So you never know. So that was funny. So yeah, Fallsworth then later reveals of the potential leak from MI6. And so the actor that a Fury member, in episode 1, when Fallsworth is speaking to this actor in her office, Fury, Talos, and Mary Hill at the time are watching from the safe house. This is the same actor that played Vincent Van Gogh in Doctor Who episode. So if you know Doctor Who, same actor. So I absolutely love Doctor Who. And eventually we'll have a Doctor Who episode and talk all the things Doctor Who related. But yeah, so fun fact about that. So we then later see Fury and Talos infiltrate the house of where they know where the submarine and everything's being monitored and controlled at. And so after Fury had to save Talos's his head from gunpoint from Bob, I guess his name's Bob. They try to get the code from Talos, or the code from Bob, and Talos ends up shooting the scroll in the chest. I don't know why I keep saying Bob. I don't know. But then, Talos calls Gaia in because, hopefully she'll help. And she does, she's on it. Like she's just, full pledge. I don't care what I'm doing, breaking into the human pod room. And so that's, basically already knowing like this is the last time she'll be able to do this, and she's running, even like, you know, Talos is like, run, because it's cover's blown kind of thing. So Gaia was able to get the memories from Bob, and Talos used, and she realizes that all the memories of Bob was of Zachary. And so we don't know if Zachary was a Skrull or not, the child, but because of Bob's memories were so strong and connected to Zachary, it's possibly that fake Bob just really essentially just connected with the son and really saw him as his own. So I mean, we don't know. But yeah, you know, some are questioning whether Gavik, you know, created this plot so that he could out Gaia. So we're not sure. But then we see, you know, Gavik shoot Gaia, and she shot dead by him. And some folks are speculating that she may still be alive, as we didn't really see her like fully bleed or die. And she's also in the trailers and other scenes that we just haven't seen her in yet. So I'm pretty sure she's not dead, because that'd not be great. And she would have died so quickly, and she's a great character. So, I mean, Emilia Clarke, so she's great. But so yeah, we don't think she's dead. Don't really think she's dead. So a lot of things on that. So, but at the end of that episode, we see Priscilla take a train. Well, she gets like this, you know, key, takes a train to a gun, takes a phone call asking for Gavik. But guys, the voice on the other end is Rhodey's voice. Is James Rhodes. It's Rhodes. It's he's a Skrull. Is he currently a Skrull? That's a question. Is he working for Gavik? You know, is he, what is happening here? What is happening? Is, you know, how we knew that Priscilla had some sketchy stuff that might have been the call she took earlier from Rhodes. Like, and here's the thing, like, we don't know, like, how, I mean, if he's a Skrull, I mean, how long has he been a Skrull? You know, there's a lot of questions there. How long, you know, how long has he been a Skrull? We don't know. Because that can be very problematic. You know, I don't, hopefully for not that long, because we've seen him in so many things, so we don't know. And I don't know. So that's a whole other thing, and so many questions, y'all. And are there two Furies? You know, are there two of them? So yeah, that's a whole other thing, you know. So yeah, so that's episode 3 breakdown, I guess, and little things. So we don't know what's going to happen, and we're going to review the next episodes and review the whole season, but do the last 3 episodes and just talk about the whole season in general. But yeah, we'll do, like, I'm always, usually for these kind of series, I won't do every episode. We'll break it down and stuff like that when we get into it. But yeah, so I would love to know y'all's thoughts about the show. It's definitely not what I expected. I think I definitely expected more, but I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot and not so much. I feel it's been pretty slow, but I think now it's starting to pick up a little bit more. So we shall see what's going to happen. So anyway, thanks all for listening to me talk and blab for, I think, probably over 40 minutes. So if you made it this far, congratulations. You are fantastic and you're great. So, but yeah, thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nerds and Jesus podcast. This podcast is produced, edited, created, and hosted by me, Mary Howell. I also run our social media and Patreon page and also did our art. The music is by John Bjork. And if you're looking for a way to get connected into the Nerds and Jesus podcast community, you can follow us on social media at Nerds and Jesus. And for more bonus content, physical merch, and so much more, you can visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/nerdsandjesus. You can also become a producer level patron as a supreme nerd, where you will get your name read at the end of every episode as well. If you would like to continue to support the show, you can share this podcast word of mouth with everyone you know. You can also review and rate our episode wherever you get your podcast. Anything helps, and thank you so much for listening to this episode. See y'all next week.